It's Wednesday, November 14th tonight. As the drought dries up riverbeds, it could force some native species into extinction. We'll have more next on North Carolina Now. When creeks and streams run dry, more than just a water source is lost. The streams themselves are ecosystems, and an ongoing drought can make life impossible for that species within that ecosystem. Kelly McCullen shows us how some native freshwater mussels are faring in the midst of the worst drought in North Carolina's recorded history.
Some North Carolina State University and state wildlife scientists are looking out and looking for the little guy during this drought. It's freshwater mussels. Some species are quite common, but others only live in North Carolina, are endangered species, and their creeks are drying up.
What we've seen is a long-term gradual decline, so that some of the rarer animals are now occupying just a small fraction of what they used to live in.
We're standing in a creek bed where in normal weather we'd be in thigh-deep water and we'd be finding live mussels. But those conditions last existed months ago.
To walk along a stream bed and see dead shells everywhere you look is definitely not a common thing.
And that's drought related?
I would have to say this is definitely drought related. I mean, most of the places that we're seeing dead shells are in areas that used to be riffles or actually contained water. You know, so short stretches like this right here where, you know, 4 or 5 months ago we were finding great assemblages of mussels is now completely dried up, and all we're seeing is shell material at this point.
There's shells everywhere, normally those animals would be thriving in the stream.
Freshwater mussels filter water and remove excess nutrients that can spawn algae blooms and other water quality problems. Mussels can bury themselves in the ground when creeks run dry. It just can't stay dry.
They can't stay there forever. At some point they have to come back up, and to get oxygen, to get food, to spawn, and eventually the sand or gravel that they're in is going to bake and dry up as well.
This Granville County creek bed contains piles of open-shelled mussels.
When they start gaping open, that means that their abductor muscle is essentially not working anymore. The flesh that you see still there in the interior portion of the shell is their abductor muscle. And once their abductor muscle goes and they open up, they're gone for.
Flesh dead. Dead. Common mussel species may die in greater numbers, but 2 exclusive North Carolina mussel species face extinction, with drought being the final straw.
A good example is the tar spiny mussel, which is limited to a very small part of the upper Tar River. And with the extended drought, because of its limited range, it may be lost.
We have a bad feeling that this drought could knock off a species like that that's so rare that we weren't able to find it in the best conditions.
The Carolina heel splitter is a mussel severely threatened by drought. It's found in the Charlotte region.
The length and degree to which this drought's continued over the last 6, 7, 8 months, and the perspective that it may actually continue for another 6 or 7 months, really is kind of a dire, there's some dire consequences potentially for these species.
You can always have the greenish hue to it.
The dwarf wedge mussel doesn't face extinction because it's found in other U.S. states, but drought could vanquish it from North Carolina waters. The scientists say time can only tell if their worries will become reality.
In all truth, we wouldn't know probably for a handful of years. What would happen is we'll come back to these places and we'll look next year. And we'll look again, and we'll look again.
I think that there's a good chance that there'll be some mussels left, but I think, like Chris was saying earlier, that they're already depressed to the point where any loss is a big loss. And so we'll just have to wait until next spring when conditions are right again to come out here and look and see what we do have left and make an assessment from that point of how dire the situation was and still is.
I think I see a live one.
And if 5 years from now we haven't seen any, where before the drought, why we used to be able to find them regularly, we probably will conclude that they're gone from this location.
Aquatic biologist Chris Eads leads the NC State College of Veterinary Medicine's effort to preserve the Carolina heel splitter.
We rescued some adult females last year, brought them into the laboratory and propagated. Now we have several hundred of these juveniles now that we're attempting to grow out and we hope to establish an experimental population.
Scientists do not know if Carolina hill splitters will survive being raised in laboratories then reintroduced into the wild, but they're giving it a shot and do have baby hill splitters growing.
With this particular species, I'll probably have more in the laboratory in that tank over there than there are in North Carolina.
Do you think you'll ever be able to convince the public to feel as warm and fuzzy about a freshwater mussel from North Carolina as compared to one of the more furry, four-legged, endangered animals that capture kids' imagination?
It's a very personal issue. These are North Carolina species.
North Carolina is home to 60 species of freshwater mussels. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission says half are listed as endangered, threatened, or of special concern.